Okay,
We're
cool.
sharing a mic, so we have to keep very close.
Yeah, we're in this.
Cozy.
Yeah.
Far too close for work relations.
We're like, we describe ourselves as work husband and wife, but we're now like very proximity close. And even as that, I'm like,
Welcome to In Bits, the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. I'm Nicola.
And I'm Liam, and we're both lecturers in psychology and cyberpsychology in IADT.
We are. So, Liam, what is our expert in bits about this week?
Our expert is in bits about our perceptions, particularly public perceptions of social media, what it is, and how, as a result of this, we conduct research. So this comes back to like a research methodsy approach. Like if we can't define something, how do we measure it and how do we provide an intervention?
Yeah. I found this one really interesting. The idea that people just can't agree on what a social network or media is and like how much difference there is. There's a fair amount of agreement on some of it, but then like there's just massive disagreement after that. It's so fascinating. So this is future Dr. Evelyn Murray. So enjoy listening to this one.
So Evelyn, thank you for joining us. We attended your talk at the beginning of the conference, and I was like, I pulled out my phone and I started actually writing questions for you for the end of the talk. And then I was like, no, I need to just will she join us? So what I want to do is ask you to start to like introduce yourself, chat to us about your research and what actually started your interest in that area.
Yeah. I'm Evelyn, and I currently work at Aston University. I am a PhD candidate in my second year of my 3-year PhD. And I'm looking at how social media use, specifically different styles of social media use, impact well-being in a very simple capacity. The title is simple, but the project is less so. And the talk I gave at this conference was almost a black sheep of my project. It's the first one, and it's the one that was spearheaded by one of my rants, essentially. And it's, looking at the public perceptions of social media use in a mixed methods approach. And that really began because as you begin any research field, you try and define your variables. And I really couldn't find clear definitions of social media that gave any encompassing definition for social media that aligned with the way that I approach it. I think a lot of us have that immediate perception of what social media is. We have a few platforms in mind that we think of when we use social media, but it turns out a lot of people don't have consistent those social media platforms. Yeah, I wanted to know how people feel about it because that informs a lot of the digital literacy and a lot of the policy making. If we know how they're feeling, we know how to approach the concerns, we know how to approach and support and what we're looking at research, because anecdotes are not research, but they begin the questions and they begin the information. And then the rest of my project looks at experimental objective measures of social media use. So a lot of combating the cross-sectional issues that we're finding in the social media and wellbeing field. So we've developed the social networking site Behaviour Task, and that is a fake social media essentially, where we're able to actually measure somebody's use with, so there's some content and there's likes, a like button, a share button and a next button. And we're able to see how they're engaging with the social media that we can provide. And we can measure afterwards their psychosocial well-being factors. We can change the content. We can really delve into an experimental social media. And that's the crux of, the paper the study that you watched at the conference is not quite the full story of my PhD. And it's the entry into it because there's a lot of background that it highlights with what the general public is thinking of social media. And then the rest of my PhD kind of gets into the nitty-gritty and the like observations of how people are using it, especially with the different styles informed by Linda Kay as my previous mentor at Edge Hill. So I've got a lot of background in that capacity as well.
I think in your results, like we have a lot of, I suppose, moral panics or prejudice around like how young people use social media and it's always going to be terrible and their experiences are awful and they get nothing good about it. And we kind of tend to fixate or focus in on that young people are having all these terrible experiences. And in your work that you were presenting, you were talking about young people having like a more balanced experience and being
Yeah.
able to kind of mitigate some of the risks that we're worried about. Could you chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lot of the specific social media use that we got people to talk about, they really highlighted the context dependence of it. They really talked about how their experiences vary across different platforms, across different days of the week. It depends, or there was one quote, it's like, well, it depends how mean people are to each other. And I think that really indicates how fluctuating and dynamic a lot of social media use can be. Yeah, a lot of the adolescents that we used were mixed. Our endorsement of the different characteristics was slightly more negative overall, but there were a lot of positives that were endorsed as well, looking at how they connect with people, how they're socializing with their friends, maintaining connection to the outside world, that sort of thing. And it's not all doom and gloom. And the general public, what's really important from this study is that it's not everyone thinks it's terrible. It's that the general public are screaming out that it's far more complicated than just good or bad. And the literature really tries to narrow it down as one or the other. And I don't think that's the most efficient way of doing it. I think obviously there's context dependence. It's human behavior and it's human experiences. So there's going to be differences across people, across cultures. I know we just looked at the UK general public, but it's going to be different, and it's going to be different across platforms as well. And when we just talk about social media, narrowing it down to one monolith isn't going to explain the variance of it. I think that's the core of this project.
Yeah. And it sounds like that variation could even be maybe not day to day, but possibly even day to day. But someone could be having a very positive experience for months. And then if something changes, if a relationship breaks down and maybe there's some bullying or there's just really negative behavior or something like that, that could completely shift it quite quickly, even though most things have remained the same. There's a huge amount of variation that can happen.
Absolutely. And looking at motivation, a lot of the discussions in the conference these past couple of days has been talking about motivation of social media use, and that it's a lot more internal than we like to think. It's not just the behavior. It's why are we doing the behavior? And it's really interesting to see that the literature is saying, it's like, well, we need different styles of use. It's not just active. It's not just passive. It's not just social media use. And then it's not just active versus passive. Like there's so much more to it. And then without prompting it, we prompted it a little bit at the end, but that was right at the end of the study. But before that, we even had participants say, it's like, oh, it depends. Like some days it's really good for me and I get to talk to my nan that lives really far away. And then other days it's like, well, I'm addicted to it, or like, oh, I fear that I'm missing out all the time, or it's causing all my anxiety. It's like, well, and that's anecdotal, but it's still starting those conversations about what is social media. It's one of my favorite things. What is it?
Yeah.
And why are we using it? How are we using it? And what for? And what are the impacts of that? Because it's such a big conversation to have, and trying to keep it as one monolith that is good or bad, it doesn't answer the question. It's too simple, far too simple.
So getting back to that idea of what is social media, I found it really fascinating. You know, there's some that people agree on, so I'll get you to talk about that. But the more interesting to me is the ones that people almost completely disagree on. It's almost like half and half or less. So I'd love you to talk about that a little bit.
I don't really have an answer for you. I think it's a lot of what the media talks about, what's social media, and that's partially the researcher's responsibility as well to inform what the research and the literature is saying about social media. And when we talk about social media, we talk about Instagram, we talk about Facebook, we talk about TikTok a lot, and sometimes we talk about X, and almost that level of popularity is that level of agreement as well. So we don't talk about how Strava affects people's well-being that much. We don't talk about how Wikipedia makes people feel connected to each other. So I think there's an element of being more inclusive of just being more specific about what social media we're talking about. Because these can be functionally really quite similar. I still argue that Facebook and LinkedIn are the same thing, but with different hats on. Like we all present ourselves to different people in different capacities. Like I'm a daughter, I'm a girlfriend, but I'm also a PhD researcher. Yeah. And so I will present myself differently to different people. And Facebook, I might talk about like what holiday I went on, but on LinkedIn, I'll talk about the preprints that I've got. So they're different behaviors, and functionally they're very similar, but we don't talk about them in the same way.
Yeah.
I don't know what the well-being impact of LinkedIn will be.
Well, you can talk about your holiday, but you have to talk about its impact on B2B sales.
Yeah, you have to talk about how it's made you a better person.
Yeah, and you're blessed.
But it's really weird for someone to like wish someone happy birthday on LinkedIn by comparison. I find those kind of things are really strange, where the person is actually taking the what we perceive the platform used to be, or the original purpose of the platform to be, and then repurposing other social media behaviors from other platforms.
And
into
isn't that
space.
strange that we're having different socializing on different platforms? So a lot of the definitions talk about functionality of platforms. They'll be like, well, there has to be user-generated content, feeds of streams of information. There has to be a way of presenting yourself. But that can't be the same thing. Like, we're not talking about the same platforms if we're putting on different people that we're being. And we're socializing in very different ways. And I think we should wish each other happy birthday on LinkedIn a bit more. I want birthday wishes from my colleagues.
But I think LinkedIn is probably one of the only platforms that gives you feedback about how well you're performing. So like the SSI score. And whereas what would we be like if we were looking for an SSI score, or like a social like mixing index instead, where we're on Facebook or Instagram or on TikTok?
It really changes the way we actively present, like broadcast ourselves on these social medias. Is we're thinking of the algorithms and the analytics, we're thinking of how we're engaging with our peers and colleagues almost, and it's more of a kind of a wafflier way of doing it. I don't think I would talk about the skills I've learned from a party I went to with my friends, but I might talk about the skills I learned from this conference later. Like it's an important, it's a different way of you're rewarded in different capacities from different platforms. And that's, super interesting.
Did you do your data collection in person with people, or were they online? Or
No, I didn't. So I used Prolific, which is the participation collection tool. And that was a fantastic tool because we managed to collect 968 participants.
Wow.
And 95 of those using were a subset, 95 who also did the quantitative, but also qualitative. Cool. So 968 participants did quantitative measures, and 95 of those people did extra qualitative questions. Gotcha. And so that really helped with the generalizability of calling it general public perceptions, which was a key part of it. We wanted to know what everybody representatively thinks, and then just handpicked. Well, I didn't handpick, it was randomly allocated whether they were doing a qualitative part as well. And we got a really good sample of it, I think.
That's an amazing sample for something like that. I was just wondering, because I was wondering how people felt about engaging with like a fake social media and what that went like. I don't know if you got any feedback like that from.
So this study didn't use the fake social media. But we did have one of my favorite quotes from the participants is final question right at the end. They've analyzed they've endorsed whether platforms are social media or not. They've talked about the characteristics. They've talked about their impacts. Final question. Any further comments, please let us know. And they just said, is this a social media? And
Meta.
I think, very meta. And I'm thinking, is a Qualtrics survey? Is Qualtrics social media? Well, some definitions think it's just a way of networking online. And if there's a form of I say something, you say something, is that networking? So I think if you squint, it could be. But that again leads the social media definition so open and so confusing almost of like, why are we trying to define this amalgamation cloud of something? But this study used questionnaires, and we didn't provide them with any of the fake social media stuff. We just gave them things to endorse and things to agree with and things to disagree with, and then the qualitative open-ended narrative questions to just write whatever they thought. And that was super interesting. I would have loved to do some interview stuff, especially when we added the styles of social media to talk about more of the nuance. I don't know if that was perfectly explained over a questionnaire. I think it would have been really cool to do a workshop style. We would have gotten fewer participants, obviously, but I think we would have been able to get a bit of a richer sample. Because again, with the styles of social media use, some of them said this is the best one, and then in the next they said this is the worst one. So the active was either the best or the worst. There's no consensus over it. And that's where the context dependence came in a lot with that of, well, sometimes when I do it to my friends, it's amazing, it's great. But then if it's someone mean, I don't want to do it and it's bad for me. And it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's the context, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So is there anything that we haven't asked you yet that you find really interesting about this area that you'd like to talk about?
I would say one of the key takeaways from this is that when you're a researcher looking at or even any disseminating of social media knowledge and research and interest, is you've got to be very clear about what you're talking about. And that doesn't matter really, as long as there's a reference point. So one of the things I advised in my talk was, if you're gonna ask people what they think of social media, potentially get them to self-define. Get them to give you platforms that they are going to specifically talk about, or give them a definition or a platform. It doesn't matter. But as long as there's this almost just joint agreement at the beginning of any part of data collection that we're all on the same page, and then you can move forward from there. Because it's too broad to say social media. It would be more beneficial to go, tell me about what social media is to you. Define it for me, or pick a few platforms that you just want to talk about. And I think that's the main thing that I would take away from this, is that we can't assume we're always talking about the same platforms, because even functionally, if we're talking about a function, there are varying different things, as we've talked about, is you'll be different people on different platforms.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Evelyn, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so
Your
much.
work is so interesting, and we'll come back to you in a couple of years when you're finished and you have loads more stuff and you have that experimental data. It's going to be so fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. Really, really fantastic.
Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure.
You can find us every second Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can also find us on social media. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube.
At InBits Podcast.
Yes. Thank you to Owen Hurley, who is our producer, editor, and wrote our really lovely piece of music for our theme tune. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, guys. See you in 2 weeks.